And so Aristotle talked about this idea of aligning your vices. And in that alignment, you reach virtue, which is very interesting. And then when you get into modern day psychology, you see the same discussions about alignment that are very similar to the discussions that we were having thousands of years ago. Not much has changed. So, Freud is an example. Freud is known for a lot of things, but one of the ideas of his that is really stuck is his theory of the subconscious. And he divided our mind into three distinct parts: the id, the ego, and the superego, which he also referred to as the ego ideal.
Mm,
And that's one of the places where we get the word ideal from in our own framework. What he said was the id, which we can now think about as the limbic system of our brain, the amygdala, the emotional parts of our body, um, of our brain and body, as the needs that we all have for survival as a race, the things that we have to get. We have to get food, we have to procreate, we need those things. And so the id is fully subconscious and it is always trying to get what the species needs. The problem with that is that that's not always appropriate for the real world. So think about food. The id is going to see the plate of chocolate cake walking by on the waiter's platter, and it's going to say, I want that cake. But if you were to just reach over and knock the waiter over and grab that piece of cake that was going to the guy at the
mhm.
table, you might have some
Start a
problems,
riot. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And so the ego is the part of the brain that hears what the id is saying it needs, and it's also monitoring the external environment, and it's saying, okay, what's the best way to fulfill the id's request? And so maybe that is to wait politely, and as the waiter walks back, flag him down and say, sir, may I please also order a piece of chocolate cake? And they would happily bring it to you, and then you could eat it. It is happy. And a lot of times that's what we end up doing. But there's the third part of the brain, which is the super ego or the ego ideal, and that's our conscious. And that's saying that what is the best thing that we can do based on what our images in our head of the person that we should be. And so the ego hears the id saying, I want that chocolate cake, but maybe it hears the ego ideal saying, you probably shouldn't be having that slice of cake because remember, you're supposed to be losing 5 pounds. And so the ego has this job of managing three different voices: the voice of the id, our limbic emotional system of what we need,
Mhm.
the voice of the ego ideal, which is our prefrontal cortex conscious, and then the voice of the environment, what's actually okay given our social norms. And so there, the idea of alignment is how can all three of those voices be the same? And when that happens, when our id, what we need, is aligned with what we should do and aligned with what's acceptable in society, that's alignment. And the ego can then shrink because it doesn't have to be big and bossy to keep everybody in line. It can shrink to a normal size. And what does it mean when the ego shrinks or doesn't shrink? It's how it defends against misalignment. So that's where we get defense
Mm,
mechanisms from:
mm.
rationalizing things, catastrophizing, things like that.